Good morning. This is Tim Stewart. I'm president at Visual Decisions, and we are here today to talk about using inductive automation ignition platform to improve manufacturing performance. I'll be joined in the second half by Frank Costa from Sandalwood Engineering and Ergonomics. To get started, I'll just give a super quick overview of ignition for those that may not be familiar with the solution. Ignition is a smart factory solution that connects to just about any device or machine on your shop floor, as well as other systems in your business. It can collect the signals coming from the sensors and machines, store that information in a database, display it on screens throughout your operation, send that data to other systems through integration capabilities, or execute workflows in apps built on the platform. Additionally, ignition enables control of the machines on the shop floor as well. It provides full SCADA capabilities, which is supervisory control and data acquisition, such that you can use the solution to issue instructions to the machines themselves, in addition to the data acquisition capabilities. Here's a quick list of the major components for ignition. I've already mentioned the SCADA capabilities and some of the IIoT or Industrial Internet of Things data collection capabilities. In addition, the ignition platform and/or applications built on the platform provide some of the following capabilities: an MES or manufacturing execution system to track production, manage work orders, and track performance; HMI or human machine interface, the ability to build displays to visualize the data and control the process; alarming with built-in capabilities to alarm and alert based on what happens on the shop floor; reporting, you can create reports and deliver those through multiple channels, and more. Some of the benefits of ignition include unlimited licensing. They have a flat fee approach to server pricing that allows for unlimited tags, devices, database connections, and clients; a universal platform where all of the capabilities presented previously are built on a single platform. It's built on standards such as SQL, OPC UA, Python, MQTT, and other ubiquitous standards, and honestly, much more. In my opinion, though, the big differentiator between ignition and other platforms is the pricing model. Not only is the initial pricing for ignition lower than competing solutions, but it's a perpetual license instead of being an annual subscription fee. Next, let me walk through some of my recommendations on how to get started with the ignition platform. When implementing smart factory solutions like ignition, the goal should be to create an initial baseline of functionality where the systems are connecting to the different machines, collecting the data, and storing the information. From there, a near infinite number of capabilities can be layered on top to transform the factory. These can be thought of as layered sprints, adding additional functionality one piece at a time. The best part is that while the value from implementation continues to grow, the costs of the software and the hardware remain relatively fixed. There's a positive ROI from the initial implementation, but the long-term value just explodes as those additional layers are added. And over the next few sections, I'll touch on each of these topics. So once the data is being persisted, updating how manufacturing data is reported is one of the first steps to taking further advantage of the new capabilities. These are just a few examples of what can be done with the information available through these systems. For one, much of the manual data collection and reporting that happens in manufacturing today can be eliminated. For example, the collection of downtime information on paper tick sheets or in Microsoft Excel can be eliminated. The data can be collected directly from the machine with some light additions from operators when necessary. And that information then can be displayed anywhere. Since the information is being bottled at the source in real time from the machines, it can be displayed on the shop floor in near real time as well. This can be used to replace paste boards, SQDCM boards, TPM towers, or visual controls that are maintained manually on the floor today. This information can also be used for real-time management reporting. At a simple level, this can be used for providing visibility to the real-time status and performance inside the offices of the building. But at a deeper level, it can be used for things like real-time cost variances when combined with financial data. Also, period KPI reporting can be automated. Whereas today it takes a number of people in the plant to compile data into an array of Excel spreadsheets for KPI reporting, that can all be automated where the data is available. And this really highlights why it's so valuable to get all or nearly all of the equipment on the same system. And finally, this can be a big part of any paperless factory initiative. So once that whole shop floor gets connected, there are a huge number of possibilities that open up when combining that shop floor data with other systems. And this isn't anywhere close to an exhaustive list, but it gives a great idea of how transformational it can be when all of the machines are reporting data. So for example, connecting the information from the machines to the maintenance management system enables a lot of additional capabilities within manufacturing. One example is to present autonomous maintenance checklists to the operator each morning, or whenever the task would be due. And this works best when it's a common process, no matter who's working at which machine on any given day. By including work instructions for the tasks, it can greatly simplify job rotations and having people step in for absent workers. These systems can also be combined to analyze preventive maintenance plans. The goal is to do enough PM tasks to keep the equipment in optimal condition, but not to do any more than is absolutely required and have the machine be down. So the combination of the systems can be used to continually monitor the PM schedule and analyze what should be done more frequently or less frequently, and what should be added and what can be eliminated. They can also be combined to automate the ticketing system. And more on this in a minute. Another piece of analysis that can be done with the information from the two systems combined is spares and tooling management analysis. The data can show how much stock to carry in much greater detail than the MMS system alone. In addition, if predictive capabilities are incorporated into the implementation, then spares required for predicted failure modes can be ordered in advance of the need on the shop floor. And that just gives an example of the power, but as you can see, there are many other systems that you can connect to and have that same level of integration with. Sorry. Finally, the layers that we added for earlier data reporting and integration, we can create some advanced workflows to support previously manual processes in the plant. I've done some detailed webinars and articles on each of these in the past, so I won't go into too much detail here, but these are very powerful capabilities that can help a company become a world-class manufacturer. Automating visual controls on the shop floor can help reduce many forms of waste while influencing the behavior of people in manufacturing in the desired directions. Problem-solving skills are, at best, uneven amongst the people in most companies. By creating workflows that automate many portions of the data collection and analysis, it can raise the effectiveness of everyone in the organization in that problem-solving process. Digital management operating systems can create alignment from the executives all the way through the shop floor, and they can mirror the policy deployment process in any company and enable everyone to see where they stand at all times to see if they're winning or losing on that day, that week, month, or year. And many other capabilities are possible as well. So with that, I'm going to jump into my conversation with Frank Costa. And Frank is joining me from Sandalwood Engineering and Ergonomics. Sandalwood is a leading implementer of Ignition, and Frank will be sharing his experience leading the group that performs those implementations for Sandalwood, and how he helps to get customers up and running and providing value with the solution. So welcome, Frank.
Thanks, Tim. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
All right. I guess let's just jump into it. From your experience, why use Ignition?
So that's a great question, Tim. During the earlier parts of your webinar, you talked about Ignition, but I think, to your point, a lot of those methodologies and ideas can be applied to IIoT in general. That being said, I believe Ignition is a really powerful tool that can be brought to bear and to be used to realize some of the principles you've set forward. And again, at the beginning of the webinar, you touched some points with respect to Ignition, and I just like to provide a little additional color to those points and expand on them a little. So originally, Ignition was designed to help facilitate the capture of PLC data into SQL Server tables via OPC connections. But over the last 20 years, it's grown into a universal industrial application platform that is used for HMI design deployment, SCADA systems, MES, and IIoT applications. Ignition, though, isn't some sleepy startup either, though. It's currently used at about 57% of the Fortune 100 companies in one form or another. And I think the key word in that description is the term platform. That's really a powerful word to me. It means it's a software package or suite of tools that a developer can use to build an application or system straight from the ground up. Like any platform, it has to be sturdy enough to support the quote unquote weight of what one wants to do, but it must be flexible enough to allow for continued growth, both in the size and breadth of the system. And what I mean by this is that it doesn't only have to have substance, it has to support scalability. And Ignition, I think Ignition does that really well. As you alluded to on the commercial side, Ignition offers an unlimited license model that supports both a fixed price buy as well as different levels of support via support subscriptions. It really all depends on the wants and needs of the customer. And this means no one is forced into any lengthy contracts or recurring costs. And in today's day and age, as you said, right, that's somewhat of a novelty. And it's important to note, by unlimited, I mean unlimited. There's no caps on tag counts, visualization development, or connectivity channels. The real limiting factor is the hardware used to run the software, and it depends on processing power and usage. And speaking of that hardware, and you alluded to it again, you can run Ignition on almost any system. The software itself supports cross-platform compatibility, meaning you have multiple instances of Ignition running on Linux, Windows, or Mac-based systems. I have personal experience with this, as I've actually installed the full-blown version of Ignition Gateway. That's our server software, not an edge type deployment, but a fully functioning gateway on a Raspberry Pi 4. To put that in context, that's a $50 ARM device running a Linux OS. Now, that being said, I wouldn't recommend running a plant on this, is the processing power isn't there. But it does go to show that the software itself is built on IT standard technologies, so as to support both multiple types of OSs, as well as multiple server and chip architectures. Going back to my previous statement about paying what you want when you need it, Ignition by design is modular. So if you need specific requirements, you pay just for those requirements. Let's say, for example, you wanted to use Ignition solely for data capture and want to use something like Power BI or Tableau to analyze that data and generate reports. And in that case, you'd only purchase the modules required for that data capture and leave out the reporting modules. in a year or further down the line, if you wanted those reports to be generated directly in Ignition, all you'd have to do is purchase the Ignition module. It's that easy. This allows for a controlled growth in your implementation based on needs and wants. Another powerful feature of Ignition is that the system is web-based and web managed. So using its perspective visualization module, screens can be developed and deployed to any system or viewer that uses an HTML5 canvas. And in layman's terms, that's basically every single modern browser. That also means that screens that are developed for your HMI can be viewed by any modern mobile device with little or no change to those screens. Now, to be fair, that statement should be taken with a grain of salt. Inside the perspective module, there are tools that make this transition easy. You just have to plan ahead for it. That being said, if you do plan ahead, you can create a single visualization that can be just as useful on a 14-inch HMI screen, a 7-inch tablet, or if you really want to, your iPhone or Android device. By design, though, anything running in a web browser is sandboxed from the OS. That means it's segregated for security reason. So if you need an HMI application that needs more hooks into those OS, Ignition does support a client-based software design deployment model, and that would be their Vision client. And again, these run on Linux, Mac, and Windows machines. I touched on scalability a little earlier on, and just to close the loop on that, Ignition is based on a server client architecture and includes several components designed to run at the edge and feed data back to the larger system. For context or an example, you may want to start implementation with a single server-sized machine that deals with all the data capture, processing, and visualization. And as your system and applications grow, you may want to offload some of that processing to edge devices. Ignition has a version of Edge whose only function is to capture and process that data, so that load can be removed from the server. So as your implementation and needs grow, all you have to do is add a couple of edge devices, again, in that instance, instead of investing in whole new servers and more expensive equipment. And by the way, those edge devices can be full-size Intel-based machines or single board ARM devices. It really all depends, again, on what your customer's applications call for. So, just to close the entire loop of that, when you ask why Ignition, there's still so many reasons why. It's a highly scalable web-enabled platform that supports multiple hardware and software architecture, and it's all bundled in an attractive perpetual license model. Oh, and one more thing. The training for this is free. I did not want to end without letting that go. They have a system called Inductive University, where you, your employees, your citizen engineers can go in and train on how to use the system and create dashboards on their own.
Fantastic. That's a lot of reasons. So you mentioned that it could be an HMI, a SCADA, or an MES system. Can you give some real world examples of how you've implemented it at different customers?
Sure. I'll give you a larger implementation and then a smaller one. So it comes to mind, a customer came to us and had the initial objective of machine control through a templatized HMI screens. And along with that, they want to integrate interfaces and dashboard for their test, repair, production, and repair strategies. So this project kind of went across the entire breadth of the services that Ignition offers. It required the ability to read and write data to the PLC, interfacing with existing SQL databases, historical data capture and reporting, and operator interface. So with a engagement like that, we typically meet with the customer to understand better their requirements. So right off the bat, we worked with them and decided all the interfaces and reporting portals would be supported by Ignition's perspective module. That's our web-based visualization tool. But for the HMIs, we were going to use the client-based tool or Vision. This is due to the fact that they were planning to, in the future, include some serial-based communication that required separate integration with another piece of software, basically more OS level controls. And this is a great example of how Ignition's flexible enough to enable both short-term goals and keep in mind what you want to do in the long term. So using Ignition's baked-in support for their native PLC drivers, I'll get into it later if you want, but they, OPC UA, Allen Bradley, Siemens, they have native drivers for that. We were able to quickly establish some memory maps in UDTs, stands for Universal User-Defined Data Types. So we developed these UDTs to be used for data capture and control. We were then able to tie in PLC signals to actually drive SQL requests to call test parameter values from a database and then write those values back to set up the test equipment, which basically was like a feedback to the same PLC that called for initial SQL requests. Using those same UDTs, we started capturing critical process and production values that range from time series test data to actual discrete cycle type data. So we, within that, we also developed several projects. A project, it was what Ignition calls a self-contained unit. You can think of them as separate apps. So you would have your production reporting app or your repair interface app or project. All these projects were web-based, as I said, and had user logging controls associated with them. Again, coded in Ignition as it has built-in user access controls, as well as the ability to interface with various SSO providers. So that was an example of one of the bigger ones where, like I said, kind of took the whole breadth of what Ignition can do. But you don't need to use Ignition just for applications that require PLC or SCADA data capture. Right now, we are currently working with a company to help digitize our prototype lab process. Currently, for every prototype product that they make, there is an Excel file associated with that specific product. And this creates a support traceability and build values. While the system works again for individual builds, there is no greater traceability back to the process steps or clarity or transparency into the test parameters or values or how the process is doing as a whole. So for this project, we'll exclusively be using the perspective module so that operators, whatever interface we come up with, they can use it on whatever device the companies make available to it, whether it be a PC work terminal, an Android or iPad, Android tablet or iPad, whatever they see fit. We'll be creating those interfaces to construct user input fields based on BOMs or BOM numbers, bill of material numbers, and process stations so that a single digital input template can be created and maintained. PCs or tablets located at these build stations will allow users to log in and select what station they're at and what step in the process they're in. And this will be tied back to hand scanners as keyboard wedges that'll be used to scan in the product and prototype identity numbers. So again, using Ignition to capture the manual inputted data, the prototype lab will now have clear visibility and traceability into the group level and individual product level information. So the digitization process is actually the first phase of a much larger project. Again, because Ignition is so flexible, we want to go ahead and just launch this initial phase to get it up and running. But we're planning to allow for hooks for a second and third phase of this project, which includes ERP integration and equipment data capture respectively, which is more in line with the SCADA. application we
Got
discussed
it.
earlier.
You mentioned ERP integration, and I was talking about integration with a variety of other systems. How well does Ignition play with a variety of systems in the companies?
Yeah, another great question, Tim. And again, you slide early in the webinar, you kind of alluded to it. Ignition comes baked in with a lot of drivers for industry standard communication protocols. Obviously, since Ignition started off as a SCADA system, a lot of those are machine-to-machine type protocols, such as the aforementioned OPC-UA, Siemens, Modbus, and such. You can actually, it's grown, so you can use modules to directly talk to SQL tables. Third-party extensions are available to talk to databases like InfluxDB, and components from third parties, can allow for the subscription and publishing back to MQTT brokers, which is kind of the backbone of the IIoT paradigm, I guess. But out of the box, Ignition does support the ability to make REST and side calls. This allows it to interact with virtually every popular ERP system, right? To get down to your point. Conversely, if you want to make data available to other systems, again, thanks to its modular nature, you can purchase modules that allow you to actually create API endpoints for those systems to interact directly with Ignition or the data held within Ignition system, whether it's a SQL table or whatnot. And again, since it's modular, you can choose what options you like to use. It's important to note too, if you have multiple gateways, only one of those has to have these extended modules. One of the beauties of the Ignition I failed to mention is the abilities for gateways to seamlessly share resources between them. So think of a hub and spoke type architecture, where a central gateway is used to talk to an existing ERP or MES system. Those calls can be enabled by a single gateway, and the data can be made available to the entire gateway network.
Excellent. We just have a couple minutes left. So just real quickly, how easy is it to actually set up Ignition? Is that something that customers can do on their own, or are they better off, at least for the initial phases, working with an integrator like Sandalwood?
Ignition gives you everything you need right on their website. So you can go down there, select what system you're running, and actually download the gateway or edge software. Right out of the box, you'll have a trial license, which is open. So everything, all its capabilities will be open to you. The only limiting factor is you'll have to reset that license every 2 hours. Other than that, you should be ready to go. Yeah, I would suggest it's super easy to bring up. You can test it out. I would highly suggest you use the Inductive University. Again, it's a free training system. It's very well laid out. Training application. It allows users to quickly progress through relevant classes and become proficient with Ignition relatively little time. Tim, we've known each other for quite a while. You know I'm not a developer, but I was able to actually start developing like useful screens, not test screens, within 3 days of starting on the university. So if you ask me, is there a learning curve? My answer is yes, of course, but it's not as steep as one would expect. Download it, install it on. You can run on a Windows machine, a VM, wherever you want to, and you'll be able to test it out on your own. This way, you can spend less time, learning, more time doing, and learning as you progress.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining me today and sharing all of this about Ignition. Any closing thoughts, or should we wrap up?
It's like everything else. It's a great tool. It's my thoughts are there are things that it can do very well and things that, you could, there are other systems out there that are focused on specific use cases. But Ignition's a great way to start your digital transformation journey, augment it or refresh it. That's it.
Well, thank you again for joining me today, and look forward to our next conversation when we do one of these in the future.
Thanks, Tim. Looking forward to it myself.
Speaking of which, here's kind of a list of the upcoming webinar Wednesdays for Visual Decisions. Some very interesting topics coming up. Hopefully everyone in the audience will join us again. Go to visualdecisions.com/events to register today. Thank you.